Joining us today on the show is Winnie Kimotho, the Assistant Manager for Tax Advisory of PKF. And today it's really interesting. We are looking at the national budget, you know, all the things that has happened. Winnie, let's get straight into it. What is your opinion of the national budget? I want to hear from you.
So thank you so very much for having me as well in the show.
No
Such an
problem.
honor. So my feel about the overall budget is that it was a budget that was meant to build back better.
Okay.
We're raising the bar high. We're saying that we're expecting our economy to grow. And in layman's terms, I'd say it's a very ambitious budget because you are projecting a growth in the economy and the GDP, whereas you're saying that you're recovering from a pandemic.
Exactly. It was really shocking to see those figures.
Yes.
Indeed. Okay.
I have a question regarding the budget. Whenever you turn on the news, you always see big headlines, the winners and the losers of the national budget. So I know it means that this department got less money, blah blah blah. But could you please elaborate more on the winners and losers of this budget?
Okay, so for me, the winners goes by how the money has been allocated. And if you look at the current allocation, then you'll see that the education sector has gotten around 27% of its allocation. You have energy, infrastructure, and ICT are getting 19% of the allocation. And we have the public administration and international relations getting 15% of the budget. Those are the top three winners. However, there's something I'd like to draw your attention to. If you look at the global outlook, the global outlook itself in terms of the world was recording a contraction of 4.3%, negative 4.3, meaning we really did not grow, but we reduced our capability in terms of GDP by 4.3%. But if you come to the East Africa region, they were really not hit by the pandemic. And in Kenya specifically, we recorded a growth of 0.6% in the GDP.
Yes.
That's I'm blown away. I think Kenya is a winner.
And so the question is, what really led to this contribution to the growth in the GDP, whilst other countries are really losing in terms of they having a contraction? And one of their greatest contributors into this was supposed to be the agricultural sector, because you remember we took a hit in the hotel industry, in the tourism industry, but for a fact and for sure the agricultural sector stood ground because people must eat. People must drink.
Even after the locusts coming in and destroying farmland, somehow the Kenyan economy, especially in the agricultural sector, found a way to grow.
Yes, and simply because if you look at and I'm sorry to say, and you have to forgive me, the locust invested areas of the country really do not do a lot of agriculture.
Right.
It's semi-arid areas. So the sectors that are really doing a lot of agriculture, they received an equal amount of rainfall that was sufficient enough to see growth, and as well there was not the desert locust did not manage to come down. And then so the thing is, for me, the greatest loser in this budget then has to be the agricultural sector.
Okay.
It's the backbone of the economy. You'd actually expect it to get a greater allocation.
Absolutely, because if that's the bread, then that's what you should be focusing on.
That's why you should be focusing all your energy on, so that it can fund the educative sector and what have you. But I'm sorry, it only got 3% of our total budget.
That's a shame. That's a shame, right?
And our population keeps growing.
Absolutely.
And it depends on food.
On food, yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a figure. All right. The financial year 2010 to 2011 had an estimated budget of about 977 billion. I repeat, billion with a B shillings. Right now we're looking at a above 3.6 trillion shilling budget. How are we going to fund this?
Well, interesting, because you're looking at a 10-year period difference, and you're saying that we really grew from billions to trillions. Not just one, it's three. But I'm going to give you the reason as to why and justify it. For us to take loans, we must be really showing that our GDP is growing over the years. So if in 2010 our GDP stood at 900 and something billion, then we could only get amounts that our GDP can sustain back then as loans. So if you really want to get so much loans, then our GDP has to grow consistently up until the level of 11 trillion as of 2020 for us to get the budgets that we want today. So for me, the growth in GDP is solely pegged on our ability to pay the loans and to borrow.
In quotes.
In quotes. I'm just got me thinking. The way I see it, then I guess GDP growth doesn't seem like a good thing. For example, the year 2010 and 2011, 1,000 could buy you a lot more.
Yes.
But now 1,000 is 2 days petrol. So and of course our GDP has grown and all those good numbers. But how do you then, does the growth of GDP always necessarily mean life is more expensive?
For me, the cost of life, of course, is going to depend on various things like inflation.
Yes.
How inflation is going to affect your purchasing power, and of course, the performance of our currency against other currencies. That's why you see one of the most macroeconomic things that the Central Bank of Kenya has to do is to ensure that our currency is not volatile compared to the US dollar and other currencies. So maybe for me, in my thinking then, inflation and the whole fluctuation in currency rates has attributed highly to the cost of living, because if we go back to 2010, the currency, if you look at it, was performing at 80 to 90 shillings averagely.
Yes.
And right now we are talking about 108.
Yes.
Can you imagine what that has done? And as well, it also has another aspect to it. If you look at it, the depreciation in our currency affects our loans, because most of our foreign debt has actually been borrowed in US dollars.
In
Yes.
US dollars.
And speaking of things getting expensive, mkate, bread. The Kenyans, we did not like when they added VAT to bread, but now bread has moved from zero rated to standard rated. What does that mean for Kenyans now?
I'll take you back. I remember it was sometime in 2014, if I'm not wrong, or 2015. In one of the statements that the CS back then tabled before Parliament was saying, I am going to zero rate bread so that they can reduce the cost to the final consumer.
Right.
So I think over time, I do not know whether the CS has identified that the same effects have not been felt in the pockets of the consumer, but I must also give it up to the bread manufacturer, simply because there is inflation, as I've said. There are a lot of changes in the cost of production. The cost of production, including
Yes.
power, has really gone up,
Yes,
if you have
power has
checked
gone
out.
up.
Even fuel.
Yeah, even fuel.
Yes.
So to a greater extent, the prices of bread right now are deserved to be at 50. And I'm not just trying to justify anyone or even to protect anyone, but what you're saying, in the current economic times, I do not think the price of bread is exaggerated. So I do not know whether the producers back then have violated that for the taxman to say, no, I want 16% of this. But on the other hand, you must also remember, for me, it's an issue that's really touching my heart, because I feel like most people are highly dependent on bread because it's the most luxurious good. For me, indeed,
Luxurious.
yes, for me, it might not be luxurious because probably your disposable income allows you just to shed off 50 bob per day.
Right.
But there's someone who's living below the average $1 per day.
Per day.
So
yeah.
for that person, then, the bread becomes a luxury, because if you're living with a means of $1 per day, what does that tell you?
For example, Watu wa Mjengo,
Yeah,
they
Watu wa
make
Mjengo.
around 300 shillings a day, and 50 bob is less than around a quarter of their earning.
And Amandip, let me tell you something. With that 100 bob, the kid must go to school.
Oof.
They must put food on the table. They
Rent,
must clothe.
yeah.
But what we say is, in the Maslow's hierarchy
Yes,
of needs, the
yeah.
basic needs cannot
Yes.
even be met using that 300 shillings.
There you go. It makes perfect sense. There will be excise duty on waged amounts in betting at the rate of not 5 or 10, 20%. Okay, what is your take on this? Is this good? Is this bad?
I'll just take you back to some submissions that you have, and I'm sorry I had the privilege of being there and present during the parliamentary considerations of the finance bill. Yeah? And the question that was raised is that, what are you really doing to the betting industry?
Right.
So I will look at the vice and I will look at the pros of it. Yeah?
Okay.
So for me, if I look at the vice of it, is that we are really chasing away people, and we're taking them to bet at the international fronts, people who are not tax resident in Kenya. Hence, you're losing more money in terms of revenues, because what it means is that if I wage 1,000 shillings to SportPesa, and I'm sorry, I'm not advertising any brand,
Yes.
or to any other person who's providing a platform, if I wage 1,000 shillings, then automatically it means that the government gets to collect 200 shillings. What are they assuming? That you had money which you should just pay for the government because you were so idle, you just wanted to bet.
You just wanted
You were
to
just chancing. For you were just chancing to get more money.
Yeah.
But they're assuming you had no other essential thing to do with the money. So just give me the 200. I help you with infrastructure or development because you didn't need the money.
Okay.
Do you understand the
Yes,
rationale?
absolutely.
And as well, it's also going to be, they are assuming that it's going to be discouraging people from betting and from the suicidal effects of betting.
Of betting, yes.
But then again, if you look at it now, the other one, this vice that they're trying to avoid, of course, now creates another greater menace, because we're saying you're going to be pushing other people to international funds of betting, other than creating the industry in Kenya and taxing it here in Kenya.
With
People
local
will still
revenue.
bet anyway.
Absolutely. If they're addicted to it, then they look for any way to do it.
Yes, they
I
will.
mean, even with stock market, it is investors do gamble in a way. Instead of teams, it's companies, right?
Thank you.
But it's I guess it's seen as a different way, because on one side is your favorite football, and on the other side is your favorite businessman.
Favorite company, yeah.
And anyway, you're not betting millions. You're
Oh,
just
yeah.
betting small amounts.
But still,
So-
I guess scale has its own advantages and disadvantages.
Of course.
But the budget, as we have already established, the budget it keeps increasing. It's 900 billion, 1 trillion. When we hit the 1 trillion mark,
Yeah.
and then 2 trillion, now we're at 3.6 trillion. And okay, does this mean we're doing better? Is the economy better, or is there no limit to how far we can go with this budget? Because I'm kind of relating it to a house budget. If we have a bigger house budget, means we have made more money in the house. People are making more money. But in the country, when you go for a country basis, what does that mean? Is it a good thing, bad thing?
I will take you to my point number one, which I was trying to say is that if you raise the ceiling of your GDP, you also get to raise the debt ceiling, because you're projecting that I'm going to make more money in the GDP. Hence, I have the ability to collect more, and I have the ability to borrow, and I have the ability to repay. However, I'd like to tell you something. Nobody ever expected that in 2020 we were going to experience a slowdown in the economy
Yeah.
brought about by a pandemic.
Allegedly.
It was never written anywhere
That it's going to
that
happen.
COVID-19 was ever going to happen in Kenya
Yes.
or even in the world.
Absolutely.
So we had to develop shockers for the pandemic. So the question is, you are projecting that the growth in GDP is going to grow by 7 trillion, my God, in 2024. So we are going to be saying we're growing from 10 trillion right now, and we're projecting it to 17 trillion. The question is, are we really even giving room for other pandemics to come in between? Are we even sure that we can grow by 7 trillion for us to raise our debt ceiling? By the time that we were borrowing, Makio, in 2019, we were saying that we're going to have a growth maybe of 5% in 2020.
Right.
But COVID-19 happened and we didn't experience that growth. So where does that put us? In fact, it pushes us lower to the red mark of us being heavily indebted to a point that we really cannot pay. So for me, as much as we really want to be optimistic with a 3.6 trillion budget, we must be very cautious about how we go about the loans, and as well, we must be in a position to collect and create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, for us to increase the revenue collection.
My God. Okay, so essentially it's just basically the way I'm looking at it. If you want to get a loan for a business that you own right now, and you go ahead and you project sales and revenues that are going to be exponentially increasing or double 200-300% growth, but in reality you're not actually considering the other factors that could affect it.
You need contingencies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying. We must create buffers for shock.
Absolutely.
For our economy. And just to take you back a little, for the last 5 years, the government has put their revenue targets up there.
Up there, yeah.
But what has been
Optimistic.
the collective deviation?
Indeed.
Can you imagine that we have not met our revenues for the last 5 years at an average of 200 billion?
My goodness.
If it's
Averaging at 200 billion.
to think of it, if a business doesn't reach its targets for 5 years, major changes take place in the business.
Yes.
Indeed.
But when it comes to a country, the systems are still kind of the same.
That's why we're calling for a post-mortem.
We know all about that. All right, I got to ask you this. This is going to get a little technical, so bear with me if you're listening. All right, so the bill has actually introduced the bid-based interest limitation. Okay, and this has basically replaced the thin capitalization interest limitation rule. How's this going to affect Kenyan businesses? Let's go straight into that.
Whoa. First of all, let's apologize to the larger public who do not understand thin cap. When you say thin capitalization, people are in
completely
in shock.
lost.
Yeah, so maybe the first thing to discuss what thin cap is.
Yes.
It's thin, then there's capitalization, the level of debt to equity.
To equity.
That's what thin capitalization is. So when you're looking at what is the level of debt to equity, it's more like you're highly geared, more than the much that you've put in.
Yes.
You have more level of debt. That's why you were
Yes.
thinly capitalized, because someone else risks toppling you because
Putting
you
more
owe
money.
them.
Yes.
You owe them, meaning they almost have control over your business. That's what you're looking at, thin capitalization.
So the gearing ratio.
Yes, and why it was introduced is because most companies, as entities, they used to come in and fund their entities in Kenya through debt,
Indeed.
making the environment uncompetitive, even for other local companies that are operating, because they have a better capital structure.
Yes.
Then what would happen is that they would take the money out in form of interest out.
Right.
You get?
Yes.
So you perform all the economic activities and then you take it out in form of interest because you're highly geared.
Yes.
So that's one of the ways to tax avoidance. That's it.
Yes.
So that was meant to ensure that also Kenya gets to tax the whole interest that is earned.
Okay.
So just now to go back now to EBITDA.
Yeah.
What it means is the earnings before interest, depreciation, taxes, and amortization.
Everything important.
Everything important. So what we're saying, you must determine what are your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Once you determine what your interests are, we're telling you as the government and not me, the proposal is that you're going to only claim interest to the extent of 30% of your EBITDA.
That's it.
So you cannot claim if you have interest payable of 1,000 shillings, and you have loans. That's what you're saying. You have loans, and you have interest payable of 1,000 shillings. You can only claim 30% of 1,000, which is 300 shillings, and then the whole other of the 700 is not going to be allowable for tax purposes. What does it have on businesses? Sadly, it's affecting both the local entities and the foreign controlled entities. Before, thin capitalization only used to apply to foreign controlled entities, but now we are saying it's going to be applicable to both foreign controlled and even local entities. So woe unto you who's a small entrepreneur, because you're going to be punished for borrowing. You're going to be punished for not having. You're going to actually have to borrow for you to pay the government.
So technically, if you have any ambitions of going into business, the best way forward is to have all the money and then go in, so your gearing ratio is okay.
Oh yes, and just to tell you the truth is that we really lobbied for this provision to be dropped. At least it can affect guys who are foreign controlled.
Right.
At least that to an extent that it doesn't affect people who are local entities, so that we do not kill our industry that is still young and it's still crippling.
And in fact, right now is the time where the smaller industries have to rise up.
We can only give people more incentives and for them to spark growth, but we cannot be having such measures that are meant to kill the small medium entrepreneurs.
It's absolutely sad. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about, what is the meaning of global CRS and why is it important?
Wow. CRS stands for Common Reporting Standards. So what we're saying is that Kenya ratified CRS,
right,
and dropped all the instruments for ratification last year. So what you're saying is that we become a signatory. Financial institutions now are going to be, they're going to be submitting information to the Treasury for a transaction that's hitting a certain threshold, say for example like 1 million and above, and then the KRA can use that information and can forward it to and share it with other revenue authorities and other countries for the betterment of this country. And more like so. I would say we're trying to fight money laundering. We're also trying to ensure that entities who are operating here in Kenya and elsewhere also get to pay their fair share of taxes.
Is this some sort of so basically, if we can prove that we do not encourage money laundering, if we want to show the public and the world that we're keeping things clean, what is the benefit at the end of the day?
The benefit at the end of the day is that we get acceptability in the international fronts. Because if you look at people like the US and even in the UK, they are really anti-AML, anti-money laundering. You get what I mean, yeah?
Yes.
So, and even to an extent that they have gone ahead and actually implicated very many laws in their countries that work against AML. So for me, this is more like an acceptability in the international fronts. And of course, we can get more out of it and more benefits. Maybe
Absolutely. Loans. Maybe loans, exactly what I was looking for. Now let's talk about COVID-19. Okay, COVID-19 has definitely impacted the economy, not just Kenya, the whole world. Okay, now for us, what is the way for us? What is our path to recovery for our economy?
Surprise. Most economies are going to recover based on how they are going to vaccinate.
Okay.
Because vaccination essentially means that you can open up your economy.
Right.
For businesses to thrive.
Right.
That's why you're saying the US is racing against time to vaccinate massively.
Massively.
To an extent that if you have actually been vaccinated the 2 rounds, you do not need to wear a mask.
Yes.
You're free. So, what is going to determine the future of tomorrow's economies for most countries is dependent on how they are going to vaccinate.
Okay.
Again, we're also looking at strengths of COVID-19 and how they're developing. Because if each and every now and then we talk about a first, a second, a third, and a fourth wave, and the first thing that we think about is locking down, what are we potentially doing to our economy?
Indeed.
We're bringing it down, right?
Indeed.
So the question is, if, like, say, for example, and I'm sorry to call this the Indian wave,
Yes.
is in Kenya, it's
Yes.
here with us.
Yes, it
and
is.
we're not even thinking about vaccinating massively for people not to be affected by that Indian wave, then where are we?
Because we saw the effect of it.
Yes, we've seen the effect of it. That's why brighter countries, and I'm sorry to say, they are really moving and racing against time to vaccinate.
Indeed.
And one of the things that are really worrying me, if you look at the allocation yesterday by the Honorable Ambassador CS Okori
Yes.
Etani,
Yeah.
one of the things that he said is that he was going to allocate 14 billion shillings to vaccinate 40 million plus Kenyans. So if you're going to allocate 14 billion just to vaccinate, that is not even enough money. I was expecting that probably would have put in, like, say, for example, 40 billion, because we really want the revenue. We want to put our businesses on the front line.
Absolutely.
You get him?
To push
And some
it
of the
faster.
and some of the VAT measures that are coming in, including taxing syringes for VAT at 16%, then that is only going to slow us down. It's going to make it expensive for us to fight COVID-19. So some of the things that we have to look at is the taxation measures of where we want to go in the fight against COVID-19. And please let me just tell you something. One more, very quick, very, very, very quick.
No problem.
COVID-19 is here to stay.
Yes.
And we have to learn how we are going to navigate through the pandemic. Be it Kenya, be it Nigeria, whichever country it is, they must learn how to navigate through the pandemic. Do not be fooled by the fact that we really haven't been ravaged by the pandemic, more like India,
Yes.
more like actually other countries like Spain. Do not be fooled. Do not think that we are such resilient that we actually do not need to put in more money for the vaccination. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Because we really weren't hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, we're really thinking we need to slack down on the vaccination. Please, no.
So
Let's have a wake-up
essentially-
call on that.
Yeah, so essentially, because we haven't been hit hard, we don't need to focus on it. That's the message.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
That's what I got. That's the message I got. But we're saying let's vaccinate massively so that we can
Absolutely.
even ensure that the people who are going to come, the foreign investors and the tourists, they can feel comfortable coming into this country. Remember, wildlife brings us a lot of money. Tourist attractions bring us a lot of money. There's no way those tourists are going to come into Kenya if they do not feel safe that we have been vaccinated or
Absolutely,
not.
absolutely. Now, talking more about the pandemic, let's talk past the pandemic. Okay, so what are our post-pandemic strategies? What's the way forward?
I am sorry, I'm only going to tell you about the post-pandemic strategies for revenue collection.
Go on, go on.
So part of the post-pandemic strategies that the KRA have come up with includes auditing people.
Okay.
And we're pushing back the audit period. Before, previously, and currently, we're saying that you can, the taxman can actually audit you for a period of not more than 5 years. So
Okay.
if you're in 2021, we're saying the taxman can only go far much back as 5 years
Yes.
in terms of auditing you. So we're talking about 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Actually, those are 6, so it starts from 2016.
Yeah.
But then again, what is the proposal is that we're going to take this far much back to check at the compliance levels for tax purposes to 7 years.
Okay.
So that we can collect more money from non-compliance.
Right.
Remember, now we are adding 2 additional
Two
years.
additional years. So
And then again, we're also looking forward to tightening the news on high net worth individuals.
right.
High net worth individuals means that Winnie is transacting a lot
Yeah.
because she's selling a lot of land. Winnie is really investing a lot in the capital markets authorities, and such other things. Is Winnie paying her tax as well? So when you're talking about high net worth individuals, it's people who are transacting volumes of money and how they are paying their taxes. So I've just highlighted for you 2 strategies on top of KRA's table right now for them to get more revenue into the table. And the last one is voluntary tax disclosure program, where they're telling
Right.
Winnie, come forward and declare your past mistakes for the last 5 years, and I'm going to give you an amnesty for the penalties and the interest that have been accrued from there from. But I don't know the uptake of that in Kenyans. Yeah.
There's also a reward scheme, isn't there?
There's also
A reward scheme.
yes for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're being told I'm going to waiver your interest and your penalties accruing from your non-compliance at 100%. But it's only dependent on when you're going to uptake this program. If
Absolutely.
you uptake it in the first year, you get 100%. In the second year, 50%. And in the third year, 25%. In the fourth year, nothing.
Nothing.
Yes.
All right. Seriously, Winnie, it's been such a pleasure. Seriously, I mean, I feel so much smarter right now. I don't know,
Thank you.
I can wear my thinking cap on proudly. This is a lot more.
You have
in
a
there.
tax hat now.
There you go. Seriously, thank you so much. I think it was very informative, and thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so very much for having me.